particular, I wanted to start out with a bit of a time warp, walk back in time. So this is a timeline that shows just where we've come over the past 5 years. So just to give you an idea, 5 years ago, we had no iPhone. Is that shocking in some ways? We had no iPhone, we had no apps. Facebook was, how many people were on Facebook in 2007? Okay, you and I, a couple people, that's it. That was 5 years ago. Just to give you another idea, Facebook Connect came out in 2008. Android just came out just a couple of years ago. It's now the #1 mobile smartphone platform. And then Timeline, as you know, just came out in September. Again, warping again how we think about content and how we produce content. And just to give you an idea what the impact of this has been, here's some information from Citi that shows how much time people are spending on these platforms. You can see the dark black line is Facebook, eclipsing all the other major platforms in Q3 of 2010, and it continues to accelerate. Now, my take from all of this is this, that it's changing the way that we create content and also how we absorb content. And this is a bit of a complicated slide, but it's showing how the combination of social and mobile platforms is having to change the way that we actually think about things. So moving away from the defined expert with credentials to the crowd actually providing wisdom, being siloed in terms of where the content comes from into groups, what's going on, being static to very dynamic. We produce content, we produce research as an organization, and the minute we put it out there, because we're looking at disruptive technologies, it's out of date. How do we take our publications and content and make it much more dynamic and living on a continual basis? Fixed time and place to actually time shifting and thinking about how do you be as quick as real time? Well, the way that we like to think about it, real time isn't actually fast enough anymore. You have to be predictive in the way that you create content. Fixed location to anywhere it being created. We're going to hear a lot about mobile throughout the next day and a half. And then also trying to be comprehensive, being the end-all and tell-all of everything that you're trying to write about and talk about, to actually bring it down to bite-sized components into the way that your audience wants to absorb it and consume it. So we're going through this tremendous change because of these new challenges coming about. And the biggest change that I have been talking about for years is this, that I do believe that social media, all these connections that we have, want to be like air. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't want to be siloed off into a place called Facebook. You don't have to go to Twitter to be social with somebody. Social is anywhere and everywhere your customers, your audiences, your publishers, the people who create it want to be. And that is anywhere where it can be useful and provide context. So how do you actually go about doing this? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this theme, but if you go on this journey with me, then believe that this will be like air. It has to be everywhere. How do you prepare for it? I'm going to talk about two major themes. First of all, what does this dynamic customer journey look like? These customers, these people, these consumers, whatever you call them, they come in so many different shapes and forms. Whatever they're doing, it is constantly changing. I like to say that whatever you found out worked today, or worked maybe yesterday, probably won't work 2 weeks from now. And this is just maddening. So how do you stay on top of that? And then we'll talk about how do you create an organization that can be also very adaptive. And I'll give you 4 points on how to prepare. So my first point around the dynamic customer journey, how do you actually develop relationships today? How are relationships formed? How can you go about creating a content strategy? And again, and the last point is, how do you create trust and transparency with this customer? Let's talk about the dynamic customer journey. A couple key things to think about. It's like standing in the middle of Times Square. It's overwhelming now for the customer. There's so many lights, so many places to go, a smorgasbord of experience to try. And what they're trying to do is figure out the best and easiest, most efficient way to go about that journey. So one of the ways we do is we actually start mapping this. And this is, you've seen this in many different ways, the funnel, the journey, customer experiences. But the way we think about it is a loop. And when you think about content, a purchase takes on a very different type of meaning. It's no longer about necessarily a transaction of payment. It could be a commitment. It could be a decision to actually move into a deeper relationship. So the way to think about this map is how do you develop and deepen that relationship as you go along with that journey, and not only from your perspective, but all the different places where that customer can be. So if you think about all the way along, start with awareness, go into consideration, but at some point there could be an influence point there, that red triangle, that somebody else could come in and sabotage where you're at. Different advertisements, different types of content, they get distracted, they're away from the computer on the mobile device. Wherever it is, that journey can take many different weaving places to go. So the question becomes, how do you stay on that journey? And also, how do you repeat that journey over and over again? It's not one singular journey. It's something that has to be repeated over and over again. And the way that we think about it is in terms of relationships. So how do you craft and develop that relationship? Well, it depends on what kind of relationship you want. Let me show you what most organizations think about relationships. They think of it as fairly transactional. It's fairly sterile. It is quite impersonal, it's occasional, it's very short-term oriented. Come and read this, do this transaction, buy that, respond to this coupon. Whatever it is, it's very oriented towards a particular action at that one time. But the relationship most organizations think they want, but haven't been able to articulate, is something that's much more loyal. It's constant. I dare say it's authentic, long-term. I would even say that it's intimate. Intimate in the way that as we develop our relationships in a personal way, we know more about each other, we develop trust, and from that becomes, again, a deeper relationship. So some of the examples I want to give, again, I love the Huffington Post. It's held up in so many ways as a company who just understands not only how to create content, having won a Pulitzer, but also really understands social. And what they do, what I love, is not in the content itself, but in the interactions. This is just a page showing the content of comments from people who are in a social network. And I love what The Guardian says. It improves the social experience. Friends have the feeling of speaking to one another, even though it's time shifted. So you can see it on that page, you can see it inside Facebook, you can see it on your mobile device, in all the different places where you would want to see that commentary from your friends, from the people who matter. And what I love about this is I don't want to hear all of the comments from all of my friends on Huffington Post. Believe me, some of them, their comments, I really do not want to hear because of the political aspects or social things. I just don't want to hear from them. But other friends, I really value. So what are we seeing here? It's not just the social graph that matters. It's also the influence graph and the interest graph. So it's about, when it comes to Huffington Post, it's one set of friends who I really respect. But when it comes to cooking, it's a completely different set of friends. And you as publishers have to think about, which social graph am I talking about? Because if you just look at my social graph in general, look at who am I friends with, not even necessarily what they do on Facebook, but maybe on All Recipes, or on The Guardian, or The Washington Post, all those different places, it becomes suddenly extremely complicated. But if you can harness that information, understand what those relationships look like, you can deliver a really unique experience that becomes very meaningful to people. Here's something from BuzzFeed. I love this diagram because it shows all the interactions inside one page on the Washington Post of all the connections they have and opportunities to extend that dialogue. It's not just the content anymore, but it's 12 different Facebook integrations into the page in many different ways. And it's not repeating over and over again, just share, share, share. It's all the different places and ways to interact with Facebook that is meaningful to the entire experience of being on the Washington Post and the people who are there and the content that's there. So this is a brilliant explanation of how deep the integration goes. And this is, again, most companies have maybe a little bit at the very top, and that's it. Maybe something in the footer. But think about all the different places that you would want to bring, again, that social experience and also bring your content back. I want to go on and talk about what content strategies look like. This is something that my colleague Rebecca Lieb has been working on, and it's really about how do you create a content strategy. Again, this is not necessarily from a content publisher, traditional publishers, but think about who is a content publisher today. It's every possible brand, anybody who interacts with customers. And one of the biggest things right now is content marketing strategies. How do you create one? And you can just, people are oftentimes just standing on the sidelines now saying, that would be really cool to get into. How do I do this? So what is Amazon doing today? Just an article recently in the Wall Street Journal talking about how they're creating content around high fashion, couture. Why would they do that? Well, if you're going to ship a product, you're going to ship a $50 shirt or a $500 shirt. If you're going to offer free shipping, you're going to want to have the highest margin possible. So they're creating lots of content in order to pursue, again, an audience that they're trying to serve. I thought I'd show you, just skip all the way over to Run. What does it look like when you can actually monetize content? And again, the example I want to give you is not what you would intuitively think of as a content producer. It's Red Bull. Anybody here drink Red Bull? Okay, I'm going to pick on you. Why do you drink Red Bull? You like it. Get that buzz, right? It's a good drink. And as a person who writes late at night, this is must do, right? You got to have that. No choice. And so what do? Do they market a drink? Is that what they do? It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. So what do they have? They have tons of content around lifestyle. So they have this site called redbullcontentpool.com. They're syndicating it. You can go in there. You can sign an agreement. They're giving it away for free, but they're also starting to charge for it. It's a fantastic syndication product, and it's also a wonderful place to aggregate information. If you are interested in, this is a whole bunch of videos that are slow motion. They have other ones that are certain points of view, done by sport, done by location, done by celebrity endorser. And so if you want to see one guy who's doing 7 Ironman marathons in 7 days, you can get the entire package for that. Stick it onto your site if that is what your audience is interested in. And why do they do this? Are they in the business of being in the content business? No, they're there to sell Energizer drinks. But they know that there's a tremendous connection between that and their products and the audiences that they want to reach. So if Red Bull is a content producer, and not just a content creator, but also a syndicator and a source for other publishers to get the information, this world is starting to get kind of crazy. I want to talk a little bit about who do you trust in as a result of that. Where does trust come from? Red Bull obviously has a very strong brand, but this is the Edelman Trust Barometer, and what it shows from 2011 to 2012, just one short year, the amount of information that people care now, the highest trust gain was from people like yourself. Again, we really crossed a chasm here, I think, in that people actually do care about that, and also increasingly caring about what employees are saying. Again, if you can identify that that is an employee and that person is speaking from an authentic place, not being edited or PR'd out there. So I want to give an example of what transparency looks like. This is kind of an old example, but I still think it's very relevant. This is a Dell laptop exploding and catching on fire. It was a conference just like this. You happen to have a Dell, so very convenient here. Let's imagine that it starts smoking and it's, you're backing away from it and it bursts into flames and everyone takes out their cameras and takes a picture of it. So it ends up on the internet. What do you do as Dell? What do you do as Dell? Send a fire extinguisher over there. There's not much you can do. It's already happened. You can't put this back into the bottle. This genie's out. So this happened back in 2006. It was 6 years ago. And what they decided to do, and they had just launched a blog, their very first blog, brand new, it was 2 weeks old when this hit. Nobody wanted to talk about their new servers or their laptops. In fact, anything that they were writing about was like, that's nice, but your laptop just caught on fire. What's going on with that? They could not have a dialogue. They could not have a relationship with anybody. So Lionel Menchaca, the chief blogger at Dell, sat down with Michael Dell and said, we have to write about this. And Michael Dell said, do it. I will give you the cover to go and write what you have to write. And this is what he wrote. He wrote a post called Flaming Notebook. That's all. This is called Flaming Notebook. And it says, beyond what you've seen about the infamous Flaming Notebook from Osaka. And he links to this picture. We don't have an update. We think it's the battery, but we'll let you know. It's really short. That's the length of the post. And there were hundreds of comments on it. And the very first comments, all of them are saying, thank you for admitting the obvious, for having the courage to talk about this. Now, the reason I show this is that this makes total sense, right? And how often do you see this happen? How many of you work for organizations today who could put up a post like this? Just a show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7. So, yeah, and the Yahoo people here. Yeah, let's talk about transparency. And what's interesting to me is thinking about all the platforms we have, the technology, how far we've come in terms of our ability to publish. But have we really come that far in terms of our ability to establish a relationship, to have a truthful and honest and transparent, authentic? These are all words we know, but do we truly live them, especially in the eyes of the people we're trying to reach? I would say we haven't come very far. We haven't come hardly anywhere at all. We have a long ways to go. So let me give you an example of that. I can't run the video, but this is the great pizza turnaround from Domino's. This is a short ad that they had, and it literally is, they ran a focus group and got all these people and videotaped them, audiotaped them, and they were saying things like, you know, Domino's pizza crust is like cardboard, your sauce is horrible, pizza falls apart when I pick it up, just thing after thing after thing. And the CEO gets up and says, you know, I've had enough. We love our pizza, and we're bound and determined to do something about it. And he goes on and talks about how we're sick of our pizza being rotten, so we decided to reinvent it. New crust, new sauces, new cheese, new delivery methods. We have turned around our pizza. Give us a try. We know our pizza sucks, basically, is what he says. What do you think? Has anybody seen this ad?
No, we didn't. That was, I think it was the
Yeah, no, we did it, yeah. Did anybody see the ad? What, did you give it a try? Anybody give it a try? Anybody try it? It's way better. Okay, I didn't say it. Domino's didn't say it. The consumers are saying, and that's exactly what they did. They said, give us a try, and they handed the microphone over to customers. I mean, this is ballsy. A CEO coming out and says, we know we suck. But it was something that everybody knew. The only reason you ordered Domino's is because you knew you could feed kids in 30 minutes. And that's the only way. And they wouldn't eat it the next day, which is a sign of a bad pizza. Now, you still get in 30 minutes, and they will eat it the next day. So they created a whole content strategy around this. This was not an advertising campaign. It was a content strategy, and more importantly, it was a company strategy. They absolutely believe this, and they continue to this day to have a very different relationship with their customers. Again, started with content, but that content comes from a place of authenticity that the company believed in. I want to give you another example of a company that had a few more problems this past season. Did anybody see this video? It was a FedEx delivery person taking a monitor and hauling it over a security fence, and it's captured on a security camera. This got, at this point when I took it, it's 8.5 million views. Okay, so what do you think the brand destruction of that was for FedEx? About 60% of the comments on there were like, this is ridiculous. 30% of the comments were like, you know, bad egg, bad apple, nothing you can do about it. But overall, FedEx tries to do the right thing. And 10% were making snarky jokes. So what do you do if you're FedEx? Did anybody see what they did as a response? Kind of tells you how effective it was. They actually put out another video. They did a response, and it was textbook. It was well done. They said, this is unacceptable. This person, we are going through disciplinary, they can't disclose what they actually did. We've talked to the owner of that monitor. We've made that whole, this guy was adamant about it. But it was, frankly, kind of clinical. This guy had never been on video before. He's in a tie. He's kind of using the motions. He's obviously reading off a telemonitor. And people were kind of snarky again, saying, oh, that's great. So if I catch you on a security camera, you'll write a video to me personally, too, as well. And I think the problem here is that the authenticity and transparency on FedEx was, are you responsive on an everyday basis to what's happening? And I think the real thing here is, how do you build trust on an every single day basis? That trust and transparency, authenticity doesn't happen overnight. You can't build authenticity. You can't be seen as authentic in the crisis. You have to be perceived as authentic and have those relationships to carry you through that crisis before you get there. So this is state of the art right now. I mean, they did textbook. I can't even begin to tell you. Check, 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 check. They did everything right, and nobody saw this. It did not resonate. Nobody heard about it. And also, they didn't do the gutsy thing. They didn't link to that video of the monitor being thrown over the fence. And that, in many ways, they stopped short of truly showing me and responding to me as a customer who says, if I'm going to listen to this, I want to believe you. If you don't even have the guts to show the original video, am I really truly going to believe you? So it has so much to do with that relationship from the customer's perspective again of how you would do this. And I think the key way to do this is to push that edge, to push that discomfort zone every single day, to be looking for that and failing forward. I want to go on and talk about how you do that as an organization. A couple things. Social media proliferation, I don't know how you all deal. I'll talk a little bit about that. I will talk about enterprise social networks, and again also about discipline in terms of how you engage with customers. So this is some research that my colleague Jeremiah Aoyang put together on social media management. And on average now, for companies over 1,000 employees, on average you're managing about 178 different media presences in social media. That is on the edge of insanity. Okay, how many of you manage like more than one Twitter account? How many times have you tweeted to the wrong account? Okay, so there you go. Here's an example of a complexity. Here is Whole Foods. This is all they manage. It's 641, and that's of February, and they were still building out even more. So they may have one for just the store, but now they have the deli in the store, the cooking in the store. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and this all needs to be managed in a somewhat centralized way. They need to know at least what people are posting, even if they don't control the content itself. And it gets even worse. The number of people who are doing this also is accelerating. As more and more people become more facile at this, you need them to manage it. And so on average, you have about one publisher for every 330 people in your employees. So do the math. If you are part of a large organization, this becomes also a people management issue. So there are many different types of platforms available. You're going to be hearing about them later on in the next day and a half. And this report is also available. Again, all of our reports are free. You can go and download them. But the key thing here is, I do believe you cannot function in this space, in the social media space, without these tools. It is a requirement now. Hootsuite can only get you so far. It's a wonderful tool, but it can only get you so far. So the amount of information you need to be able to prepare, to engage, listen, analyze, and then act, manage workflows is so complex, you need to have these tools. Want to give you an idea of what enterprise social networks could potentially look like. Most organizations look like this, fairly hierarchical. And that's how they're organized. In reality, this is how work actually gets done. It's a mess, right? And we have these interconnections back and forth. How do you actually start building that? And the research I've been doing recently is around how can you actually, if you're going to create this huge groundswell of customers out there, you have to have a groundswell of employees to be able to meet it too as well. So how do you empower employees to be able to create the content, to create the engagement at that individual level? One of the things that I'm looking at is how you use internal social networks, enterprise social networks to do this. And in particular, this is a life cycle, maturity model that we've been working on. And this is the second report I'll be putting out later this month. At the beginning, when you put out these ESNs, they're very connection-oriented. People are just going to go, wee, I have a profile like Facebook inside my company. I can just do all this stuff. And it's people just sort of putting out things on an ad hoc basis, very, very random. And then over time, you begin to solve problems with this. And companies, the key thing that we look for is how quickly can they move to collaboration with very specific use cases, ways to have people engage with each other. From there, you can start thinking about workflows actually changing instead of exception management happening. And then finally, transformation. And I'll give you an example. One of my favorite things that people do inside these enterprise social networks is expense reporting and exception handling. So when there's an expense report that needs to be handled by somebody, they go and they check it, and they pass it around the enterprise social network, and the file follows along. You can see all the dialogue behind it. So instead of being lost in email, you can track it in one place. That becomes optimized, and the transformation later happens where you can get all these approvals done in advance. And so instead of thinking about the exceptions that have to happen, because you know this person is going to be taking a trip to a certain place, you can anticipate that this is going to need pre-approvals, and then that can take care of itself. So we're talking about not only fixing workflows, but also creating new ones. And think about from the production standpoint, how many times when you're creating content, are you managing exceptions? A lot. What if you could get rid of those exceptions and make things work better instead of things being tossed over the wall? So from a production point of view, I think this is one of those organizational things and platforms inside the organization that could really transform the way you even create the content in order to be more flexible and adaptive to meeting that dynamic customer outside. I want to talk about discipline, and we look at it from a standpoint of readiness. This is what we call the hierarchy of needs to be ready. And at the very bottom, do you have clear objectives, policies, educations in place? And then from there, workflows, crisis preparedness, and everything else. Unfortunately, most organizations, when they're thinking about how do I engage in a deep way with customers, and my audiences are thinking about things at the very top of this pyramid without having done the work at the bottom to build that foundation. I'll give you an example here. Most companies don't do this still, but you have a message that comes in through social media. And if it's positive, you go on to the right side. This is from the US Air Force. If it's positive, you just follow this triage map. And if it's negative, you follow the other side of the map. This is really simple. How many of you have this? Show of hands. Anybody? Okay, this is the normal response I get. So you're not out, you know, this is very typical. But this is table stakes. You have to have this because these customers are coming in sometimes through email, through the phone, through the web, and you have this for those interactions with customers. And yet you don't have it in a place where it can become extremely viral if you don't address what those needs are happening. You're losing an opportunity, if it's positive, to amplify that positive message. You're losing an opportunity to mitigate an unhappy relationship if it's negative and comes in. So just the monitoring, the workflow, and the discipline that comes from just establishing what this map looks like is what you have to do in order to meet where that customer is coming in from. So I encourage you, this took the woman who was running this program about 2 days to walk around, map it out, make sure that all the various departments were on board with this triage map. It didn't take a long time, and if you really look at this, it's not that complicated. But you do have to map it out. And we're at that point now where this space requires that type of discipline to be able to know what these workflows will look like and how it's going to impact our business operations. And then from the mobile side, you'll hear more about this again throughout the day, and also from my colleague Chris, is the whole idea of what kind of controls do you need to put in place, from mobile devices to loss mitigation. And it always starts not with the technology, but with the business case, understanding who needs to use what mobile device and how much access do they need to all the ways down into that. And governance is a key part of that, both on the personnel side and on the technology side. All right, I want to go on to how to prepare 4 things, and then I think we have some time for questions too. So the first thing is you've got to have a strategy. When it comes to engaging with this dynamic customer, you have to have a way of thinking, how am I going to support them and meet their needs along that strategy? And what we have found, and I've been using this model now for a very long time, for over 6 years, is that you've got to learn and listen from them first, and then from there decide how you will have a dialogue, how you will support them, and how you will innovate with them. It's as simple as that. All goals kind of flow from one of these areas, but if at the minimum you have to listen and learn, and then from there decide how you want to act. That is not an option, you have to do that. But it's having a strategy, writing it down. It doesn't have to be extravagant and long, but it needs to say, what kind of goal am I going to have in the future, 3 years from now? And one of the foundations for that, again, is what kind of relationship do you want? What is that goal, and what is that roadmap I'm going to have to get to that goal? And very importantly, how will I recognize when I'm veering off of that roadmap? And how do I decide how I'm going to get back onto it? So let's take my favorite bright, shiny object of the moment, Pinterest. Every organization I go and talk to, every business goes, so what do you think we should do with Pinterest? You're shaking your head. You hear the same question all the time, right? And the question becomes, well, it's really nice, it's interesting, it's very women-dominated, you can tell all the facts. Let's look at your strategy roadmap. Does it fit on that roadmap? Does it help you achieve your goals? And that's where you have to start from. And you can't begin to evaluate Pinterest if you don't have this. Let's go on to the next thing, which is, again, we get asked this question all the time. What's the value of social media? And I love this quote from the CMO of American Express, John Hayes. He says, we tend to overvalue the things that we can measure and to undervalue the things we cannot. And I like to say, spoken like a true marketer, right? 50% of my ads work, I don't know which half. Well, the same thing here, but it's even more important because what is social media, what are these new technologies really good at? They're really good at creating and deepening relationships. And how do you measure relationships inside your organization? Is it lifetime value? Is it net promoter score? Is it customer satisfaction? Those are true values. Those are true measurements. And yet, so seldom do we take all of these digital assets that we have and say, how do we add up to those core measurements of what truly drives value for the organization and for those customers? We've done some research, and we've actually found 6 common goals and also developed some very deep metrics around them. This is a report my colleague Susan Edlinger wrote. And so, for example, she's writing a deeper report now that looks at revenue generation. What are the social media metrics that actually support revenue generation? And you can start tying the loops all the way from down here, and it's more than just likes or the number of people who are reading your blog. How do you relate that and tie that back to revenue generation? Or maybe it's not even that, maybe it's brand health, or maybe it's customer experience and satisfaction. But knowing, again, what that strategy is and what you're trying to achieve, and then how you're going to measure progress towards that goal are the 2 fundamental things you have to have in place before you do anything else. You can't move forward unless you have that strategy and a way to measure progress towards those goals. The third thing is to figure out where social media, I love this question, lives inside the organization. And let me give it to you in the framework again of relationships. Who owns the relationship with your customers today? Who owns it, truly owns it? And people kind of scratch their heads. They're kind of like, well, it's like maybe these 5 people, these 5 departments. I'm like, well, those 5 people then need to be owning your social media strategy too, because it's about those relationships. So I go back to, this is an evolution of what we've seen various companies do and some data behind it. Many people started with a very decentralized organization and they move into a centralized, and many people are at what we call the hub and spoke, a strong center group that manages all of these different technologies, mobile, digital, social, and then they work out into the spoke. Over time, as these organizations grow, you're going to develop centers of excellence inside those spokes too and move to multiple hub and spoke. But we see some organizations now moving to holistic. And holistic is this pie in the sky nirvana where everybody does it. Everybody has responsibilities into it. Zappos is very much there. They don't have a social media policy because they say we just have a customer service policy. We have something that says go and serve that customer. Know what the constraints are, know what you can and can't do, and it starts from day 1 of your training. And so social media is just one of those channels. It's not something parsed out and separated. It's a very holistic approach. And my take is people say, well, that's Zappos. They're different, they're new, they can do this. It is all about culture and leadership. And I do believe, I've seen more and more organizations say, it is going to build culture and leadership. Dell is trying to move in this direction. They have trained 35,000 people now out of their 100,000 people in their workforce. So 1/3 of their people are trained on social media fundamentals. They have trained, I think, close to 5,000 people to be certified in the use of social media in their jobs. So they are certified, they've gone through courses to be able to use this on behalf of the company. That's usually 4,950 more people than their next competitor. Thousands of people being trained on a regular basis. So this is, again, when I think about what can Dell do, what can Zappos do in terms of engaging with those customers, that level of interaction is so much higher than what most organizations can do today. The fourth thing and final thing is, again, to that point, how do you actually invest in training in these organizations? And these are for some data points that we have. How much of your budget, how many of you are putting training as a priority? And it's one of the top priorities for social strategies inside the organizations. But then we ask the question, how much are you spending on this? And no, this is for companies over 1,000 employees, and on average, they're spending less than $25,000 on social media training. That's nothing. When you think about 1,000 employees that you're going to train, how do you do this? And so I think it's time to really think about, if you were actually going to believe that social media will be like air, how do you prepare yourself for that interaction that has to scale tremendously? We see that training does have to be differentiated. And we think about executives needing a very different approach that they need to, first of all, understand what this is versus looking over the shoulders of their teenagers and their colleagues. They really need to know what are the right questions to ask to keep the company on the right path towards that strategy. How do they deal with the bright, shiny objects that come in? And also, how do you lead an organization that's becoming a social business with people interacting in these social channels inside an organization? Centers of excellence, the social strategists need something different. Somebody at the business unit needs something different. And every single employee needs to be aware of how can they be safe and use this in a proactive way. So I'm just going to end with my theme again. I do believe that social media will be like air, that you have to prepare for this future and think about what are the things that I have to do to change my organization facing those customers. If those customers want to be everywhere, how am I going to be able to meet them and create the experiences that they want to have too as well? This is my contact information. Feel free to stay in touch. Email me if you'd like to get the slides. Happy to share those. And I think we can open up for questions.
Thank you, Charlene. Do we have a question back there from Mr. Keating?
Charlene, great presentation. I'm curious now as the electoral cycle heats up and we see a lot of politicians, besides the ones who've already gotten thrown out of office for doing the wrong things with social media, but how do you see this presidential campaign shaping up in terms of the use of social media?
Well, we saw Obama in 2008 really blow the doors off of it, whereas every other candidate was kind of clueless about it. And he just kind of rode that early wave in terms of using it. So this is, again, I think table stakes. And what's interesting is the Republican National Committee has been hyperactive in this area, very active in terms of activating its grassroots, sort of in a stealth mode. And they're not known for this necessarily. But so I do think that not only at the presidential level, but what I'm looking for is happening at the local level to see how far it's penetrated. And there's a lot of activity. If you haven't been asked to join and use these, or doing YouTube video contests, asking things back and forth. So pretty much all the politicians have Twitter accounts. They're all on YouTube, they're all on Facebook. Most of them are not doing it very well, to be honest. They're sort of just pushing it out there, and they're not really truly developing a relationship. I'll give you one insight into this. The biggest letdown from the campaign in 2008 from a social media perspective is that people got all riled up because it is a branding campaign, if you think about it, selling a politician. It's a very different thing when you're moving from this excitement of branding into operating. And the campaign really lost some opportunities there to really say, how do we crowdsource government? Because it was a new organization, new administration coming in, not quite sure how to do this. So it'll be interesting to see how organizations, how politicians in particular transition from campaign to governing, because that transition just didn't happen, it just dropped. But if it's truly a relationship, you will be able to leverage that relationship from that campaign, ride the coattails of that momentum, and be able to use that and leverage that into initiatives that you're trying to pass through whatever ordinance that you're trying to move.
Question over here.
Yeah.
Robin Neidorf with Free Pint. Great presentation, really enjoyed it. One thing I'm interested in, though, is a lot of your examples were from consumer relationships. And a lot of us here are B2B publishers, and I find in a lot of cases a B2B publisher may in fact be ahead of their customer base in terms of their ability to integrate social relationships. I often find with my own customer base, they're in regulated industries, they're in industries where or companies where the culture is very much against opening up to authentic relationships with suppliers. And I don't know if you've got any insights as to how that's going.
I'll give you a couple examples. I think the thing about B2B is that you typically have one stakeholder, again, in B2B decisions. B2B publishing is a little bit different. But that B2B stakeholder oftentimes has 20 people standing behind them. And we also know in B2B, it is about a long-term relationship. And so social media is fantastic for all those touch points along the way in that decision journey. So when we map out that customer journey for B2B, regulated even, you can see all the different touch points and influence points along there where you can actually have a meaningful relationship with people and move it along better and faster. And so I think about all the points in that 9-month process, let's say, of working with that person through the decisions. And if you start looking at that point, what kind of social media content, engagement, interactions, discussion groups, Twitter, different aspects of Facebook that would actually enter into that. One of my exercises that I do with B2B companies in general, not just even publishers, is to go into the presumably consumer-facing places like Facebook in particular and see what kind of conversations are happening. And increasingly now, it is very much happening in the B2B space. One example I had was somebody was talking about franchise financing. I mean, it's a pretty esoteric space, right? And this one organization was saying, nobody talks about it. Found this one person, and they go, oh, that is my customer who I was trying to talk to just 2 weeks ago. And he's on Facebook talking about the fact he's going to a conference on franchise financing. And I go, wouldn't it have been helpful to know what he was saying on there? And so if you don't even begin to, you never know when it's going to happen. And this was just a random search that I did. Again, I go back to learn and listen. You have to find out where those channels are and decide whether that audience is there. And just because it's not there today, it might be there in 2 weeks. So that monitoring has to be constant. Right. By the way, one of my favorite publishers for B2B is Boeing. They have a wonderful blog, Facebook page, Twitter account. And how many of you are in the marketplace for a 747? You know, not many of us are. And they have like 40,000 people following them. There may be 200 people who buy those airplanes. Why do they do this? And it is because we ride on Boeing airplanes, and our opinion of their brand matters. So just because it's B2B doesn't mean necessarily that it's always just that one stakeholder. It is an entire ecosystem that you have to address.
Do you see one common either mistake, if you will, with the B2B publishers and B2B companies is they really start to really leverage social media and getting their content out onto those types of platforms?
I think it's the assumption again that because these are traditional platforms, traditionally B2C, that there's no place for that dialogue. And if there's anything that we see is that people are mixing work and personal, and business is very personal. So I think to be there. And again, I don't have the examples from the B2B publishers, but I think about, in particular, on your sites themselves, having those tentacles that the Washington Post had is a no-brainer in terms of that. Do you want to establish a deep presence on Facebook? I'm not convinced of that necessarily, but LinkedIn may be a very good place. I'm thinking about video in particular being extremely valuable in terms of that
if
content.
I could just pick up on that a little bit. I mean, what I often find with some of my customers is that they've been trained by the organizations to be so cautious about what they put into the public sphere. Mm-hmm. So, for example, their own corporate culture might be, you can't do anything. And they may want to be in relationship, but feel constrained by not really wanting to put their neck out there, or just, really not that culture of caution. But I think your point about monitoring and knowing that it could change in 2 weeks is a really important one.
Right, and you just said a culture of caution, and I think that what I try to do with my clients is to put out the importance of a culture of sharing. I'm not asking you to put all your secrets out there, but I think you can share a lot more. And if there's one thing that you want to share in a B2B space, it's customer successes. You can't share enough about customer successes. We're always looking for more and more cases and examples and testimonials from people. And there's never enough of that. So, hey, make it easy for people to do this. Make it, put out the environment. What you are as a publisher is you're making that marketplace. And so you can make it easy for people to find each other, then that's a great way to do it.
Charlene, just following up on the Dell examples. So I know they're obviously putting in an effort. They don't have, the brand equity for Dell is pretty low right now. And this may be in response to that, but I'm just wondering if you've seen anything yet on metrics. I know they have the Dell Deals, Twitter accounts, and things like that I'm sure people follow to buy it and sell. But I haven't seen, from my perspective, any positive lift of sort of the Dell brand, from things they've done socially. Are there any results yet?
Yeah, I mean, just from Dell Hell in 2005, I mean, they were literally the poster child for how not to do social media. And now they're oftentimes the poster child for that. And the way that we kind of look at it and the way they kind of look at it, you imagine how much worse it could be. And what they have done, again, they have all these other systemic issues around just being Dell. But Michael Dell lives this. And he has said, if we didn't have this ability to listen to customers, we'd be lost. We would have no fighting chance. So they have invested in the 60-person listening command center. If they do nothing else, they're going to listen to what customers are saying. And sometimes people say, well, maybe that's your biggest problem is you're listening too much to them and don't have a strategy on the other side. Well, that's something different. But I think as an organization, for them to be listening and doing that at least, it has helped them tremendously. Their negative sentiment was 75%. Their sentiment was 75 negative at the time of that notebook. It is now 75% positive. So they still have a lot of problems. 25% negative isn't great, but they flipped it. And they flipped it within 18 months. And primarily because of social media. So you can run the numbers on that one. It's tremendous value to them.
Any other questions? Well, Charlene, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
It's very good. Thank you.